I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume. So I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. So now we are returning to Joseph Smith history. Our last reading was the visit of Moroni. He came 3 times in one night, then a 4th time the next day. Joseph Smith was directed to go to the Hill Cumorah to find the plates. He found them, but was not allowed to take them. That's where we left it off. We also read section 2 in the Doctrine and Covenants because it just restates what Moroni, or part of what Moroni said to Joseph Smith. So now we are going to pick it up in Joseph Smith history, part 4. As my father's worldly circumstances were very limited, we were under the necessity of laboring with our hands, hiring out by day's work and otherwise, as we could get opportunity. Sometimes we were at home and sometimes abroad, and by continuous labor were enabled to get a comfortable maintenance. In the year 1823, my father's family met with a great affliction by the death of my eldest brother Alvin. In the month of October 1825, I hired with an old gentleman by the name of Josiah Stoll, who lived in Canango County, state of New York. He had heard something of a silver mine having been opened by the Spaniards in Harmony, Susquehanna County, state of Pennsylvania, and had, previous to my hiring to him, been digging in order, if possible, to discover the mine. After I went to live with him, he took me with the rest of his hands to dig for the silver mine, at which I continued to work for nearly a month, without success in our undertaking, and finally I prevailed with the old gentleman to cease digging after it. Hence arose the very prevalent story of my having been a money digger. During that time that I was thus employed, I was put to board with a Mr. Isaac Hale of that place. It was there I first saw my wife, his daughter, Emma Hale. On the 18th of January, 1827, we were married, while I was yet employed in the service of Mr. Stoll. Owing to my continuing to assert that I had seen a vision, persecution still followed me, and my wife's father's family were very much opposed to our being married. I was therefore under the necessity of taking her elsewhere. So we went and were married at the house of Squire Tarbill in South Bainbridge, Canango County, New York. Immediately after my marriage, I left Mr. Stoll's and went to my father's, and farmed with him that season. At length the time arrived for obtaining the plates, the Urim and Thummim, and the breastplate. On the 22nd day of September, 1827, having gone as usual at the end of another year to the place where they were deposited, the same heavenly messenger delivered them up to me, with this charge, that I should be responsible for them, that if I should let them go carelessly or through any neglect of mine, I should be cut off, but that if I would use all my endeavors to preserve them until he, the messenger, should call for them, they should be protected. I soon found out the reason why I had received such strict charges to keep them safe, and why it was that the messenger had said that when I had done what was required at my hand, he would call for them. For no sooner was it known that I had them, than the most strenuous exertions were used to get them from me. Every stratagem that could be invented was resorted to for that purpose. The persecution became more bitter and severe than before, and multitudes were on the alert continually to get them from me if possible. But by the wisdom of God, they remained safe in my hands until I had accomplished by them what was required at my hand. When, according to arrangements, the messenger called for them, I delivered them up to him, and he has them in his charge until this day, being the 2nd day of May, 1838. The excitement, however, still continued, and rumor, with her 1,000 tongues, was all the time employed in circulating falsehoods about my father's family and about myself. If I were to relate 1,000th part of them, it would fill up volumes. The persecution, however, became so intolerable that I was under the necessity of leaving Manchester and going with my wife to Susquehanna County in the state of Pennsylvania. While preparing to start, being very poor, and the persecution so heavy upon us that there was no probability that we would ever be otherwise, in the midst of our afflictions we found a friend in a gentleman by the name of Martin Harris, who came to us and gave me $50 to assist us on our journey. Mr. Harris was a resident of Palmyra Township, Wayne County, in the state of New York, and a farmer of respectability. By this timely aid was I enabled to reach the place of my destination in Pennsylvania, and immediately after my arrival there, I commenced copying the characters off the plates. I copied a considerable number of them, and by means of the Urim and Thummim I translated some of them, which I did between the time I arrived at the house of my wife's father in the month of December and the February following. Sometime in the month of February, the aforementioned Mr. Martin Harris came to our place, got the characters which I had drawn off the plates, and started with them to the city of New York. For what took place relative to him and the characters, I refer to his own account of the circumstances as he related them to me after his return, which was as follows. I went to the city of New York and presented the characters which had been translated with the translation thereof to Professor Charles Anthon, a gentleman celebrated for his literary attainments. Professor Anthon stated that the translation was correct, more so than any he had before seen translated from the Egyptian. I then showed him those which were not yet translated, and he said that they were Egyptian, Chaldaic, Syriac, and Arabic, and he said they were true characters. He gave me a certificate certifying to the people of Palmyra that they were true characters, and that the translation of such of them as had been translated was also correct. I took the certificate and put it into my pocket and was just leaving the house when Mr. Anthon called me back and asked me how the young man found out that there were gold plates in the place where he found them. I answered that an angel of God had revealed it unto him. He then said to me, "Let me see that certificate." I accordingly took it out of my pocket and gave it to him, when he took it and tore it to pieces, saying that there was no such thing now as ministering of angels, and that if I would bring the plates to him, he would translate them. I informed him that part of the plates were sealed, and that I was forbidden to bring them. He replied, "I cannot read a sealed book." I left him and went to Dr. Mitchell, who sanctioned what Professor Anthon had said respecting both the characters and the translation. Okay, this covers the 4 or so years from the visit of Moroni, the first visit, until Joseph Smith gets the plates, and a little bit after. It takes us about 6 months after Joseph Smith gets the plates. So we cover about 4.5 years here. Note that Joseph Smith, he mentions a couple of things. He went to work for Josiah Stoll, first in digging for this silver mine, although he says that he only did that for about a month, but still a year or so, about 2 years later, he's still working for Josiah Stoll. So he clearly did other work for him, but that is not specified. And I'm not up on my history right there. But we do note that him and Emma eloped because her parents were not fond of the idea of their marriage, and their elopement was legal because I'm pretty sure that Emma was older than Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith was already 18. Well, was over 18. So they had to elope. But also note, it mentions the death of Alvin, but it only says that he died in the year 1823. But he did die after Joseph Smith was first visited by Moroni, and Alvin died in November, about 2 months after the visitation of Moroni. We then have the story of Martin Harris. As the persecution gets up, Joseph Smith gets the plates, the persecution ramps up. They have to go back down to Pennsylvania to escape the persecution, although they still get persecuted down there. But they have a short period of rest because of Emma's family. Emma's family does kind of defend them and keeps the persecution down. But Martin Harris gives them $50, enabling them to make the move to Pennsylvania. In modern days, in 2025, that would be the equivalent of approximately $1,550. That's the approximate equivalent. So it was a fair amount of money. This was travel expenses. This wasn't, he wasn't buying a car. They already had a wagon. They already had everything they needed to take with them, but it was the travel expenses on the way. It enabled them to pay for the journey. And then we have the famous story of Dr. Charles Anthon and Martin Harris. I cannot read a sealed book. This is all going back to Isaiah chapter 29 and that great prophecy. But there's not much else for me to say about that. So I'm going to leave it here, and we turn to the Doctrine and Covenants next. So I will see you there.